All right, this is part 2 of the domain and range lesson that I have for you. I think we did talk about absolute value functions and what they look like. If you're not sure how to put that in a calculator very quickly, here's what you do. You go your y equals again. Then, in order to make the absolute value bars, you have to press the math button. And then you go over to the NUM. And then the very first option is ABS. That means absolute value. So you do that in order to get your absolute value symbols on your calculator. And just real quick, let's look at that. We're going to talk more about absolute value functions and how they move all over the graph, but just in a general sense, let's talk about the domain. Now again, it could go on and on forever to the left. So it could be negative infinity is your smallest x. We don't know how far it's going to go. And then, of course, let's just put in our values for our x, because it's always going to be like that if you're talking about things that go from one side of the graph to the other. All right, and then on the right, it could go on and on forever again in the domain. So it's going to go to positive infinity. All right, so now the range gets a little trickier. So starting at the bottom of your graph, because we're talking about y's, all right, so this, the up and down part, is your range. So let's go to the bottom of your graph and then put a little dot or something, or mark, when you get to the lowest point of your graph. Well, your lowest point of your graph looks to be right there. What is that point? Well, that point is 0, 0. What's the y value of that point? The y value is 0. So your smallest point, or your smallest y value is 0. And we're talking about range, so we're going to put a y in instead of an x. And then think about this. It keeps going up and up and up and up and up forever. Up and up and up and up forever. So that's going to be infinity. That's all you do with that. You're just going to look for your lowest y value. Okay? All right, let's try another one. Now, we didn't do this one in class, so this will be new. You're looking at just the graph. This is a graph of a circle. We're going to learn how to graph these, but let's talk about what's the domain and what's the range. So how far to the left does it go on the graph? It doesn't go to infinity. It stops at this point. And then how far to the right does it go on the graph? Well, it goes to that point. So what are your x values? Well, that looks to be negative 3 for your x value, right? 1, 2, 3. And then this other side is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So your domain starts at negative 3, talking about x's, so you put those 3 things there, and it goes to 9. And that's it. That's your domain. And remember, this little thing right here in the middle means between. So all your x values are between negative 3 and 9. All these values all the way around. All the x values are somewhere between negative 3 and 9. Is this a function? Oh, I don't think so, because it crossed it twice. All right, it's not a function. It is a relation, but it is not a function. But we can still talk about the domain and the range, even though it is not a function. All right, let's talk about the range now. So the range goes, look at your lowest y, and you probably can't see it on your screen, but it's right. Let me move the screen a little bit. Okay, your lowest y is going to be right down here, bottom of your circle. What's that number? 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 5. And then let's just pretend that I did the circle right and it ended up here. So I was supposed to make it like that. So let's see, how high up does it go? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now practice writing your range with your lowest number and your highest number. I'll put this in the middle for you. And you check that. Okay, it should be -5 to 7. That's your range. All right, let's look at your assignment. Okay, your assignment says sketch a graph of each function and then use a table to plot the points, state the domain and range. I'm going to go ahead and draw that, and then you can check it, and then we'll talk about the domain and the range. Okay, so I plotted a few points. I basically just did the y-intercept, and I knew the slope was 1, so I knew how to count it. Now, you can't just leave them as points. You have to fill it in and connect your dots and make the dots go all the way from one side of the graph. So it's falling off the graph here and it's falling off the graph there. Now let's talk about our domain and range. How far to the left will it end up going? Oh, forever. How far to the right will it end up going? Probably forever. So we're going to call it all reals, which is really -infinity to +infinity. Now we think up and down. How far down does your graph go? Well, you see it stops in your eye at -10, but the arrow says it's going to keep going. So it's going to go to -infinity. And I filled in my x's and my y's. And then you're going to make how far up is it going to go eventually? Well, it looks like it's stopping at 6, but really it's going to keep going and going and going and going. So we don't really say it stops at 6. We say it stops at infinity. And there you go, all real numbers for any kind of linear equation usually. All right, let's look at the next one. We got x squared minus 4. Go ahead and look at your graph. I'm going to graph mine real quick. Okay, so this is the graph of it. I kind of drew a pretty good sketch. I plotted a few points, so if you have trouble putting that in your calculator, remember you're doing the y equals. That means f of x. And then you're going to put in x, raise it to the second power, right? Second power. You have to go over to get out of it if you have a new calculator. So press the over or the right hand arrow key and then subtract 4. And then it should look like that. If you have a big giant exponent, you did something wrong. You got to go and press the arrow key to get out of it. All right, so let's talk about the domain and the range. Okay, again, it's probably going to go on to the left eventually forever and the right forever. So we're going to say it goes from -infinity to +infinity. But the range is a little different. Where's your lowest y? Go ahead and draw something at your lowest y, and let's figure out that number. -1, -2, -3, -4 is your lowest y value. And then if you look, it's going to keep going. It's going to keep going, so it goes to infinity. And again, we're talking about y. Now this could be equal to -4. So we're going to put a little equal sign under that. There you go. All right, let's try another one. Okay, now you got y equals, and you got to put in square root. So that is second x squared to find your square root. And then it should keep a parenthesis right there, and then you do x plus 6. But make sure that that 6 stays under the radical sign. All right, go ahead and graph it if you haven't done it. All right, it should be the top half of a parabola turned on its side. Okay, so that's what it looks like. It looks like a very skinny parabola turned on its side a little bit. So I plotted a few points. I noticed that I don't have any negative y values in my table. You can go back and check yours, but you don't have any negative y values. So let's talk about the domain first. Now, go all the way to the left. Is it going to go forever to the left? No, it's not going forever to the left. The very left-hand smallest x is right here at -6. And yeah, if it were like an arrow being shot, it would go on forever. And why is it doing that? All right, go on forever and ever and ever. So yeah, it will go on forever. And that's your x's. Now it could be equal to -6, so we're going to put a equal sign under there. Now, go into your table. If you don't believe me, what's your lowest y value? Do you see any negative numbers in your y value? You don't. Your smallest y value is 0. Okay, so yes, of course, it's right here. It doesn't go below the red line, and that is 0. So we're going to go and, well, eventually, even though this is a really flat curve, it will eventually get to be a much bigger number. Okay, because you could put in 100 for x, and you would get the square root of 106. Well, that's a pretty big number. That's like 10 point something. So it is going to keep getting bigger and bigger. It's not going to stop. So the range is going to keep going and going and going. So we're going to call it infinity. So then y is less than infinity. It never can be equal to, but it could be greater than or equal to 0. All right, that's that one. Let's go on to the next. So remember how to use your fraction in your calculator. G of x is the same as y. So we put in y equals. Now you can do, if you have a new calculator, you can do alpha y equals, and it's going to give you a nice, lovely little place to put your fraction. If you don't have a new calculator, that's fine. Just remember to put in, you're going to put in parentheses. So you're going to do 1 divided by, you're not going to get a division sign though. All right, you're going to get 1, you're going to get a little slash thing. Put in parentheses x minus 2, make sure that that whole thing goes together. Otherwise, you're going to get some weird looking thing. All right, I'll give you a minute to check your graph. Okay, here's my graph. So think domain. It can go all the way over here to the left. It starts to go toward the right, and then, oh no, it drops off. Okay, same thing here. It comes down, it never goes past 2, and then it goes on forever. So it does go on to infinity, and it does go on to negative infinity. So I put the wrong symbols in here because there's just something that it's not going to be allowed to be equal to. Well, what's going to make your denominator be 0? Can't have your denominator be 0. What number do we put in here to make 2x minus 2 equal to 0? Well, if x was equal to 2, that whole thing would be 0. So we say x is not allowed to be 2. And you can preface it with the real number sign if you like. All right, so then let's look at the range. The range says, well, what line are we not crossing? Well, it looks like it's hovering along this line. Oh, I picked the wrong color. Hovering along this line, and then it slides down and goes, scoots along that line again. So what is that y value? Count up the ladder, okay? Or count down. You know this is -1, that's -2, -3. That's got to be 0. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So y cannot be 0. And again, could be real numbers. Why does it keep erasing? I don't know. All right, that's it for your homework. So we're going to start talking about some other things tomorrow, talking about the end of the graph. So it will be called end behavior starting tomorrow. And we're also going to be talking about zeros tomorrow. Where is it crossing the graph? All right, have a great day.